And greetings, everybody. Keith here. Hoping everybody's having a good day, enjoying life, living life, loving life. Want to remind everybody, hit that like, share, and subscribe button. There's a PayPal link down there for anybody that wants to share some love. And of course, the StreamYard link is there for anybody that wants to join the panel. We've got John and Anthony with us tonight. How you doing tonight, guys?
Good, Keith. How you doing?
I'm great, brother. Thanks for asking. How about yourself?
Awesome. Made it another day. So we'll see how it goes again tomorrow. In the meantime, we're going to talk about that filing identification number in lieu of a name and address. And if you remember last night, it talked about the validity that you have to profess in the document. So we have to remember the consequences of you filing these documents and stuff is you have to make sure the information you put down there is valid. That's the first and foremost. That's the equity imputes an intent to fulfill an obligation. If you want equity, you must first come with equity. So therefore, you must know what your obligation is in everything you do. So we're doing some research on it. And before I go any further, I want to put out a big thanks to all my supporters. One more time, hit that like, share, and subscribe button. There is a PayPal link down there for anybody who wants to share some love. We hit 3,500 subscribers yesterday, and I just wanted to put out a special thanks for everybody. Appreciate it. It's been a long 8 years since I started on Facebook, about 5.5, almost 6 years now on YouTube. So appreciate it always. So let's get into it. And tonight we are talking about the filing identification number. Now this is in relations to 19 CFR 149.3. 19 CFR 149.3, and its heading is data elements. And in there, that's where you will find that the buyer, the seller, and the shipped party can use a widely recognized internationally identified commercial identification number, something like that, that you can use in lieu of the name and address. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about filing identification number that allows us to give that number instead of a name and address. And it says, generally, each person, business, firm, and remember I showed you the court documents where they they convert the last name to a firm name. So it's a partnership, like I mentioned on that form yesterday, a partnership with a state and local government agency, all that kind of shit. Government agency or other organization shall file Customs Form 5106, which expired 2 days ago. And I want to remind you, even though it expired 2 days ago, this is why I say you don't necessarily have to use the forms. You can provide an affidavit with the information they need in order to provide the same public accommodation. Notification of importer's number or application for importer's number or notice of change of address or name or address with the first formal entry which is submitted or the first request for services that will result in the issuance of a bill or a refund check. Remember, that's what the drawback was talking about, was a refund check for all the taxes, duties, imposts, and excises, because they weren't your duties. That wasn't your duty. Upon adjustment of a cash collection. Okay, the record itself with all the enumeration, all them dollar amounts, that's a collection of the cash. That's literally what it is. It's a cash collection. So when you go through and correct the record, that's going to be the cash collection. It's going to be what the record reflects that you paid in, by using cash items, checks, cash, other things. A customs form 5106 shall be filed for the ultimate consignee for which such entry is being made. Customs form 5106 may be obtained from any customs office. And as we saw in the other day, the drawback is done through a certain place for electronic. So again, they have to have an electronic ability for everything involving drawback, including the filing of a number and the application of a number. Preparation of Customs Form 5106, the identification number to be used when filing Custom Form 5106 shall be Internal Revenue Service Employer Identification Number. If no Internal Revenue Service Employer Identification Number has been assigned, the Social Security number. But remember, we weren't filing it for any reason but other than to be assigned a custom number. So we won't be giving either of these numbers for that assignment. We will be verifying that we have one, but we wish to apply for the customs number. If neither an Internal Revenue Service Employer Identification Number nor a Social Security number has been assigned, the word none shall be written on the line provided for each of these numbers on Custom Form 5106, and the form shall be filed in duplicate. Okay, that's if you provide that number. Assignment of Importer Identification Number upon receipt of a Customs Form 5106 without an Internal Revenue Service Employer Identification Number or a Social Security number, an Importer Identification Number shall be assigned and entered on the Customs Form 5106 by the Customs Office where the entry of or request for services is received. The duplicate copy of the form shall be returned to the filing party. So you're going to fill out the form requesting the number. They're going to put a number on there and give you a copy of that, as opposed to the being filed in duplicate. Optional additional identification. Form 5106 contains blocks for a 2-digit suffix code, which may be written in as an addition to the Internal Revenue Service Employer Identification Number to provide an optional additional identification. So it would have to be attached to the IRS EIN. So you would have to have one of those first to then have an optional additional identification. Retention of the importer identification number and an importer identification number shall remain on file until 1 year from the date on which it is last used on Customs Form 7501. And that's an entry summary. That's an entry summary. So this would be like a form for you that you could use just like an affidavit. Again, same thing. To determine relevant information regarding the imported commodity. Includes detailed instructions on completing CBP Form 7501. Again, they're just looking for the information that qualifies for your entry. Or its electronic equivalent. And again, like I said, the drawback system is that electronic equivalent, and therefore you should be able to make that request there. If not used for 1 year and there is no outstanding transaction to which it must be associated, the importer identification number will be removed from the customs files. To engage in future transactions described in paragraph A of this subsection or of this section, the person, business firm, government agency, or other organization previously covered by an importer identification number must file another custom form 5106. So you just enter another affidavit. Remember we talked about selling, the grantor sells the estate property to the trust for possession and use, and that puts a freeze on the asset. That's how you freeze your assets, by selling it to a trust. That way they have to go through the trust first, and the trust has a first lien by issuance of the promissory note to purchase the property. Those importers identifying customs transactions through the procedure specified in paragraph D of this section and desiring to ensure that they receive such customs transaction notifications as may be issued may request customs to freeze the name and address information. Again, it's the filing of a number in lieu of the name and address, and the name and address is an asset that you can freeze. Does that make sense, guys? Are you following along?
Yep. Yep, makes sense. And the customs document refers to the birth certificate, which is international customs document, right, Keith?
Correct, because you're using it in an international venue. Greetings, Kevin. How you doing tonight?
Hi. Good.
Are you following
My house
along?
was struck by, so I'm trying to figure out my internet, and I'm trying to join panels.
That kind of makes
my
it
internet
kind of tough, doesn't it? That makes it kind of tough, doesn't it?
Yeah. My stuff's all messed up.
All right. Well, we hope you can hang in and at least take notes if you need to. But feel free to speak up anytime you can.
Sure. Thanks for having me on.
You bet. Anytime. So let's get back into it. As it says, the name and address information, regardless of what is shown on the Customs Form 5106 or request for services, by designating the name and title or position of the individual in their company authorized to effect name address changes to the important record number, identification information, and specifying the IRNs and suffixes to be frozen, and the mailing address and or physical location address of the company where customs notifications are directed. And this is why we were talking the other day about the P.O. box. That's where the company should be registered. That way everything goes through the Postal Service themselves. And that's in relations to the company authorized, their company, the position designating the name and title of the individual in their company authorized to affect the name and address. That's that power of attorney that you attach to that form. So again, if you're giving an affidavit, then you would attach that power of attorney to the affidavit. And remember, it's the first formal entry. Where was that? Or the first request for services that will result in the issuance of a bill or a refund check upon adjustment of a cash collection. And that's why we're correcting the record. There's an adjustment. It was entered in error. Participation in the freeze program is voluntary. Everything's voluntary, folks. Requests to participate should be sent to, and then they give you the National Finance Center, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, Office of Administration, Revenue Division. Telling you, all of the finances and revenue and commercial activities are through the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, through the Office of Administration, which is the registered agent. The Postal Regulatory Commission and the registered agent is the Postal Service. That's truly the form of government. That's truly the regulatory capacity of the government. The Postal Regulatory Commission, and they have a registered agent, the United States Postal Service, and it's those that have the capital, which consists of the equity, and therefore the United States is merely the title holder, which is 1/10 of the law. Equity is the 9/10, possession and use. You guys got anything on that before we go on to definitions?
Nope, I'm good.
So the instruction to send that birth certificate when you are ultimately settling the estate to the post office is extremely important, seeing as how the equity goes through the post as far as estate affairs is concerned.
Yep, and that's why I insist that if they're the equity holder, then you make sure that the United States is holding that title in order to clear those accounts. Once that's cleared, now you've got a new title. It's a reversion in a merger of the new private estate trust.
You have been redeemed.
Yep, resurrected in a new name. So let's take a look at the definitions.
Keith, just a quick question. Could we use the dispatch book at the PO to do a name change or address change?
I was hoping Jesse would be on again tonight. He would be able to speak a little bit more on that. He actually has that in operation with the firm book and the manual dispatch. And I think that's a lot what it has to do with the address is you're no longer using an address. You're using an accounting book that does everything by numbers, while it keeps the name and address hidden. Does that make sense?
Yep, thanks.
That's your private relief. So let's take a look at it. Starts out, it says, as used in this chapter, the following terms shall have the meanings indicated unless either the context in which they are used requires a different meaning or a different definition is prescribed for a particular part or portion thereof. Let's go down, and we're going to show you duties. Duties. Duties means customs duties and any internal revenue taxes which attach upon importation. So again, taxes are duly paid by stamp. And again, it's the Postal Service that operates the customs. They're the ones that operate all the shipping inland, all of the importation from naval waters to coastal waters to inland waters to inlands. The last mile, the end of the line, the final destination, from point of origin to final destination, it's all the Postal Service and shipping duties under Navy, Admiralty, Maritime laws. And that's where the duties exist. It's not my duty. Importer. Importer means the person primarily liable for the payment of any duties on the merchandise. Aren't the customs officers already obligated for their own duties? So what we have is a delegation of duties on down the chain, folks. And everybody's taking upon those imported duties on a presumption of a legal entity transferring property, and it never reaches the end of the mile, the last mile, the end of the line, the final destination. It never reaches the beneficiary. It's supposed to reach the beneficiary so that the beneficiary can consume it. That's what the benefit is for his use, possession and use. So if I give John an apple and I call it a gift and he is the beneficiary, you don't expect him to maintain it and hold on to it. You expect him to possess it and use it as it's meant to be used. And that's consumption.
So Keith, can I put a dot together here? You're claiming the equity from the Postal Service as far as all these, the full account, as it were, goes.
Yep.
Legal title is transferred to the either Department of Health, Secretary of Treasury, and or Post Office, Postmaster General.
One to each.
One to each. Yep. And then you are taking the equity as you are the proper heir claimant from it being held in what's it called?
Abeyance.
Abeyance. Yes, thank you. Okay. Yep. Cool. Perfect.
Yeah,
thank
and
you.
all I'm doing is I'm coming forward as the rightful claimant and making a valid claim. That's all I'm doing.
Right. Founded on the proper evidence and full knowledge of the facts, which is extremely important.
Correct. It says here the consignee or the importer of record. And remember, you exported. Somebody else put it in their records. They are the importer. So you are only an importer if you import something into your record and you are keeping records of what you imported into them. And you import them into your records because they are important to you. If they're not important to you, then don't import them. The actual owner of the merchandise, like I said, the beneficiary never reaches the beneficiary in this presumption of legal fictions. If an actual owner's declaration and superseding bond has been filed in accordance with 141.20 of this chapter, or the transferee of the merchandise if the right to withdraw merchandise in a bonded warehouse has been transferred in accordance with subpart C of part 4 and 44 of this chapter. But we are the actual owner. And how do we know we're the actual owner? Because it can only act upon the name which is on the certificate. Nobody else can perfect that title in their name. Only you can. So, 19 CFR 141.20, actual owner's declaration and superseding bond of actual owner. And so what is that declaration? That's that affidavit I've been talking about. You do not need to fill out any of their forms. You just need to make a declaration. Make sure that you coin your words so that it becomes a memorandum of law, a private relief law, you might say. So let's look at it. Declaration of owner. A consignee in whose name an entry summary for consumption, warehouse, or temporary importation under bond is filed, or in whose name a re-warehouse entry or manufacturing warehouse entry is made, and who desires, under the provisions of Section 485D of the Tariff Act of 1930 as amended, and it tells us it's 19 U.S.C. 1485D, to be relieved from statutory liability for the payment of an increased and additional duties, shall declare at the time of the filing of the entry summary or entry documentation, as provided in 141.19A, that he is not the actual owner of the merchandise, furnish the name and address of the owner, and file with CBP, either at the port of entry or electronically within 90 days from the time of entry, a declaration of the actual owner of the merchandise, acknowledging that the actual owner will pay all additional and increased duties. Declaration of the owner shall be filed in customs form 3347. Declaration of owner for merchandise obtained in pursuance of a purchase or agreement to purchase. The OMB date is expired. However, this form is still valid for use and is under review by OMB awaiting a new expiration date. So this would be the same thing that I've been presenting about Form 5106. They'll just put it under review. It's still valid for use until they get a new expiration date. Okay, on this form here, superseding bond surety code. That's going to be the code on your birth certificate. Okay. Port of entry for mine is Waterloo, Iowa. Port code 50701. The importer number of authorized agent. When I get it, show hyphens. Vessel carrier arrived from. State of Iowa. Secretary of State. See, and there's their Privacy Act statement. And again, that's at 5 U.S.C. 552A. Records maintained on individuals. You have a right to your privacy, folks. And this is telling us right here that the authority comes from the two sections we just looked at. So let's go back. It says bond of actual owner. If the consignee desires to be relieved from the contractual liability for the payment of increased and additional duties voluntarily assumed by him under the single entry bond, which he filed in connection with the entry documentation and or entry summary, or under his continuous bond against which the entry or entry summary is charged, he shall file a bond of the actual owner on Custom Form 301, containing the bond conditions set forth in 113.62 of this chapter with Customs and Border Protection, either at the port of entry or electronically within 90 days from the time of entry. So again, all of this stuff seems to be eligible to be entered into the drawback electronic records without documentation. As long as you know how to enter it. Appropriate party to execute and file. Neither the declaration of the actual owner nor the bond of the actual owner shall be accepted unless executed by the actual owner or his duly authorized agent and filed by the nominal consignee or his duly authorized agent. So what we're doing here is we're assigning the postal service at that port of entry. We're going to assign that postmaster as the authorized agent on that side of the counter to file. Non-resident actual owner. If the actual owner is a non-resident, the actual owner's declaration shall not be accepted as compliance with Section 485 Tariff Act as amended, unless there is filed therewith the owner's bond on Custom Form 301, containing the bond conditions set forth in 113.62 of this chapter, with a resident corporate surety. That's what the bond is. That was entered in through enumeration at birth, and it's known as a birth certificate. and they claim it to be the resident at the state. And it is a resident corporate surety bond.
So you're going to be using that Customs Form 301 as a non-resident foreign to the United States.
Correct, it would seem. And again, not necessarily that I would use the form, but that would be information that I would put in the affidavit.
Yeah, that's right. And to display your knowledge in the fact, that's what you're
Right.
attaching,
Right.
or at least conveying to them in your documentation.
Right. And so already we have activity code 8 would be single transaction only for the lifetime estate, establishing an advanced deposit credit account where once the records are corrected, there's a remainder of credits that are transferred to this account, the estate trust account, and that's what all purchases in the future, all applications would be relevant to from now on, and it would be an extension of credit and not the pledging of or conferring of a debt to a future date. It would be an extension of credit, like I explained with the battery of a car. I got a guy, a neighbor, that's got his car out in the parking lot and it's dead. He asked me to borrow my battery charger. I say, sure. I go out, we set it up, we let it charge up for a while, we charge up his battery. I get my battery charger back. I charged up their system. It allows them to make up whatever numbers they need to in their system to pay everybody and run that part of the system. But I get my electronic credits back. That's circulation. Now that money in their system can circulate and be paid for whatever until it's no longer usable, and they have to make new money. Same thing.
Yeah, that's that payment of sin.
Right.
When you're no longer in sin, but you're in the kingdom.
Right, and you don't, and like I said, it's a single transaction only, and this is under detention of copyrighted material. You're going to save that name and address and everything. You don't want that out there, and it's under that premise that you're protecting something, and that's the name and address. Single transaction, resurrection. We're going to change it up on them so they don't recognize it, yet they'll have the ability to recognize it. You know what I mean? Keith Orland Little is no longer Keith Orland Little. That's the detention of copyrighted material. Now it's Keith Orland Little Estate Trust. Now it's firmly expressed in trust form, and they bet not try to violate.
And particularly, I mean, there's only two kinds of trusts. If we learn from, basic trusts, what we learn from Gilbert's law summaries, it's private and charitable. So if you're operating a public charitable trust and you redeem into that private trust, they have no business.
Right.
No lawful business whatsoever.
Yep. All right, so let's go back to it. Filing of declaration of owner for purposes other than relief from liability. And that's why we're filing is for relief from liability. So if it's other than relief from liability, then what it's telling you here is that you're taking on liability. So when we file declarations of entry, it's taking on a liability. We can file a declaration of owner for purposes other than, for other than liability, and rather for relief from the liability. And that's what we're doing. We've been held liable for statutory liability, which means contract terms and conditions required to implement statutes or executive orders, commercial items, commercial products, commercial services, when finding out that in order to be licensed to do that kind of stuff, we have to take upon an oath of office. So we're not qualified for duties in any sense. We shouldn't have been charged duties, let alone additional duties that one might want to take upon under statutory liability. Because that's what statutory liability is. It's for the payment of increased and additional duties. Okay? Everybody's already got a duty, naturally. And that's all we need to be held to. And that's being fair, just, and owe no man anything. If you want to be part of the liability for the payment of increased and additional duties, then you have to take upon an oath of office and placate that you don't have natural rights and that you can only do this stuff under a license. I think that's insanity. So let's look at the last one here. 11362, basic importation and entry bond conditions. Basic importation and entry bond conditions, agreement to pay duties, taxes, and charges. That's the same kind of verbiage as we see in that motor vehicle operator's lease, wherein you take upon the tax ownership and insurance ownership while relinquishing your private property as a pledge to the state for their ownership to lease back to you, and then intend to perform at least 50% of its use for your trade or business, which again means the performance of the functions of public office, meaning you first have to have an oath of office to do so. It reiterates itself through all jurisdictions. The law is construed to be uniform throughout all jurisdictions. They just say it differently in each jurisdiction. It still says the same thing. I'm not liable. You have to apply it to yourself knowingly and with intent, meaning you have to give a statement of intent. Otherwise, there's no evidence of that intent.
Well, that's the truth hidden in plain sight right there, is when they use the word uniform. Who uses uniforms?
Yep. Absolutely. And I think that's about all I wanted to. Agreement to make or complete entry. Reimbursement and exoneration of the United States. The obligors agree to pay the compensation and expenses of any CBP officer as required by law or regulation. Exonerate the United States and its officers from any risk, loss, or expense arising out of principles, importation, entry, or withdrawal of merchandise. And see, we're not doing any of that. Unless it would be withdrawal of merchandise from the warehouse, as I spoke of earlier. But again, it's not as a matter of duties. It's a matter of the beneficiary receiving what's being held in abeyance for him, and that's why we're withdrawing it. All we got to do is make that valid claim. Go ahead.
Yeah, I apologize. But that is the warehouse. That's the abeyance, the property held in trust, and that's your warehouse receipt, as it were. The birth certificate is.
Correct. Agreement on duty-free entries or withdrawals. If the principal enters or withdraws any merchandise without payment of duty and tax, or at a reduced rate, the original issue discount rate of duty and tax as permitted under the law, the principal agrees to use and handle the merchandise in the manner and for purpose entitling it to duty-free treatment. That's private possession and use. If a fishing vessel, to present the original approved application to CBP within 24 hours on each arrival of the vessel in the customs territory of the United States from a fishing voyage, so it's an entry into the territory, okay, to furnish timely proof to CBP that any merchandise entered or withdrawn under any law permitting duty-free treatment was used in accordance with that law. And that's that. Again, owe no man anything but to love one another. If your brother be waxen and poor and sold off his belongings, you shall redeem him. To keep safely all withdrawn beverages remaining on board while the vessel is in port. to keep safely all withdrawn beverages remaining on board while the vessel is in port. Does that sound like they just don't want you drinking? Consequence of default. If the principal defaults on agreements in this condition other than conditions in paragraphs A, G, I, J, K, 2, L, or M of this section, the obligors agree to pay liquidated damages equal to the value of the merchandise involved in the default. So again, we're not dealing with anything but thing that's already here, and we're not actually withdrawing the merchandise. We're withdrawing the duties, taxes, imposts, and excises that attach to it. And that thing about giving leeway to the United States and reconciling with them earlier, that goes to 50 U.S.C. 4305 and the full acquittance and discharge, where no person shall be held liable in any court. That includes the United States, because you're doing it in the interest of the United States. Again, remember, they're supposed to have legal title, and in the interest of the United States being able to maintain that legal title, they have to maintain the equity title. So you put the title in the hands of the equity holder, and they reconcile the records with an agreement they already have with them, and give us equal consideration. That's that equal station in life. We're able to hold the legal title too. So what we do is we collect up that legal title and have them settle all the accounts, so that anything that's a remainder is reverted to a new legal title. Now we hold an equal station. We just don't have the same. The United States just no longer has the legal title. They can have a legal title for somebody else, but it ain't mine. And I've got the same equity as the holder, Postal Service.
So does
Greetings,
that collapse
Gigi.
the trust?
When you go through settlement, it collapses the trust. And like I said, when you turn around and do the reversion and merger with the new estate trust, now you've got an account with the Postal Service that you can establish credits on. And that's how you fund it. You can fund it that way. Or Jesse, I wish he was up here. You can fund it again through the birth certificate by adding birth certificates. You can add additional funds.
So you don't have to make like a separate receiving living trust account. It's just the redeemed one that's
you establish it with the Postal Service. You let them know you've got an estate trust, and you give them the title by opening an account in that title. Enterprise
they
payment.
haven't known this whole time.
Say what?
They haven't known. Like it's there's no notice that they received or any constructive thing.
No, it's all implied. And that's why we're dealing with express trust. Once you express the trust, they can't deny it. If they deny the trust, that's the problem. So the reverse of that is it's an implied trust. Everybody assumes the trust. And then when you express the trust by your knowledge and show them that, hey, you're the authorized representative. You are assigned by the Postal Regulatory Commission. That means they're the principal. They hold the obligation to me, the third-party beneficiary, benefactor, who is known as the obligee, and you're the one entrusted in that trust setup with the liability to respond accordingly to both sides of that ping pong table.
Son of a bitch. That's all I can say.
It's all about trust law, folks, and what your position is in that. And again, equity deems that the beneficiary is the true owner. And as the true owner, you get to make the assignments. So that means if somebody else is making the assignments, it's not your trust. And if they're assigning you, You might want to think about what happened. Social Security assigns you a number or assigns a number to the person and then authorizes you to be the representative. Very explicit language and a very detailed setup of how it goes. It's logic. First, the number was assigned to the legal name that was established because mom gave them the given name and a family name, and they translated it to a legal name. So you don't get enumerated until mama does something. Once that enumeration is done, it's identifying a record, not you. The memorial, the memorandum, the declaration that needs to be made was supposed to have been done at birth to prevent that entry.
The mother's will, as it were.
Yep. Actually, the father's will, the legacy, because father wasn't there. Father doesn't catch the baby no more. Used to be a common thing. Daddy would catch the baby. Or an even more common thing was bathtub births or water births. Much more, seemingly much easier on the bodies, both mom and babies. So anyway, that's what we've got for tonight is that name and number, the number in lieu of the name and address, excuse me. And we're finding out how to go about doing that because the data elements we've been giving them aren't valid and we need to correct that record. And when we correct that record, we want a different way of entering everything to protect that name and address so we don't screw up the record anymore. What do you guys got on the way out?
Maybe vital stats too. We should talk to them. Change the record
Well,
with them.
that's what the Health and Human Services did. That's the very starting point. The statistical record is going to help them pull up all of the records in the state that you provided through your public education, your employment, all the taxes, everything. They have connections to all those records. They're all on the Social Security statement. Everything you ever used that Social Security number for was entered into the Social Security record, and they have records on it.
Is that live numitant report and the numitant report?
No, that's the Social Security statement. You have a live numitant you got to get first before you get the decedent numitant. If you get the decedent numitant first, they'll say no, that account's closed. You can't come back and get the live numitant. You have to get the live numitant first, and then the decedent numitant and Social Security statements. And I'm not saying you have to. That's their job. I'm not going to get any of them. I'm just going to, if they need to know, I'm going to let them know. We need to go through the live numitant, the decedent numitant, the Social Security statement. I want to know about all insurance credits, all tax credits, all unearned income credits, all of that stuff. I want to know. I've got my list of everything I paid into child support. I want a list of everything I paid into IRS. I want a list of all the FICA and Social Security payments, all of it. I want it all reconciled to zero. Owe no man anything. What do you got, JG?
No, I was going to ask you something about the theater commander, right? The head of the military is the theater commander. Is that the Navy or the Marines? Or it's neither?
It's the Navy. That's like the JAG and the admirals.
Okay, so the head of the military, the entire military is the military theater in the Navy?
Yep.
Gotcha. All right.
All right. Anything else, guys?
Oh, good show, Keith.
All right. I will be back tomorrow night with the address from the DMM and the IMM, Domestic Mail Manual, International Mail Manual. We're going over the address format to show you it's just simply a matter of adding on to your 3-line address that you already use, adding on to that by using United States of America, and maybe even changing the grammatical style of the name that you use so it's not the legal name. Other than that, you guys know me. I love you, but I don't give a rat's ass whether you love me back or not. That's to say I don't care if you hate me. I don't care if you don't respect me. That's on you. So may God bless you and have a good night. We'll see everybody next time. Bye now.